Welcome everyone. So we have started the last lunch talk for this fall slash this year, I think. As you can see, I'm doing this streaming at home. I also have a boyfriend in the background running around. He's there waving and so on. So yeah, welcome to the lunch talk. It's a bi-weekly event here at The Great Journey where we invite people from the industry to share their stories and knowledge with us. My name is Rosanna Johansson, and I am the Community and Communication Manager here at The Great Journey. And I'm so happy that all of you have joined us today. I think this, as I said before, this is the last lunch talk we have for now. We're gonna announce new ones in January, February. So looking forward to that. But on to today's lunch talk. Today we welcome Martin Lindell from Embracer Group. And he's going to talk about the Swedish game history with us. So on to you, Martin.
Hello. Thanks for being here. So first off, I just want to say quickly that the slides are in Swedish, but I will speak in English if there's anybody out there, so you know that it might be tough to understand the text. So the Swedish games industry, we have a lot of success lately. There's a tremendous whiff of the industry. But how did it start and where do we come from? But first, who am I? Well, I've been working with games since '94, retail, editorial, marketing, publishing, currently senior advisor at Embracer Group. I've been writing some books about video games. Essentially, I felt there was a history that wasn't documented, and there was a lot of American perspectives. I wanted to capture this so it's not lost in time, and that resulted in the book called 8-bitar på 80-talet about the Swedish Nintendo history. It was quite unique, age of pioneering. The latest book is Svensk Videospelsutveckling, essentially Swedish video game development, which I wrote together with Thomas Sund here. There's a lot of the material shown here is from that book. To put some context, this is some known data on Swedish companies and employees in the games industry. You have companies on the red line, and the numbers to the right, and you have employees on the other axis, the blue line. And it's from the Swedish games industry. And you can see this is like we're closing to 25 billion SEK. It's almost like the hockey stick, even a bit more aggressive than the previous slide. A lot of it is due to successes. I mean, DICE, of course, but Embracer, Mojang, King, also Stillfront is quite big. So we have quite a lot of companies that are substantially big, also from a global perspective. But how did it start? This is mostly to put it in perspective. We're going to go way back to the 50s, because then the first computers came to Sweden. The first simulator that could be considered a game is the Cannon program by Johan Sundqvist. It was essentially a simulator like trying to calculate the trajectory of a bullet being fired from a cannon. Interesting enough, there was a lot of women that were programmers back then, very good programmers, because they were mathematicians and it was considered like office work, so they got assigned a lot of this work, but they were very skilled. One of the prominent ones were Elsa Karin Bostad Nilsson at the Försvarets forskningsanstalt, like the research, and I don't know the English word for the research part of the defense. She hired a lot of other women. These computers were usually terminals, meaning you had a central computer, then the terminal was actually only like an input device. And one of the earlier games in the late 70s were Stuga, Cottage, at the Stockholm's data central, which was a text adventure where you input commands and like go west or go north, like you've seen in other text adventures. That was played through these terminals. We're going to watch a small video just to see how it looked at this time.
Datamaskin, en snabb banbrytare och föregångare i den nya tekniken. Generella datasystem utvecklades i de egna laboratorierna. I samarbete med olika expertgrupper för tillämpning och programmering. Med mångårig erfarenhet av olika datamaskiner inom koncernen.
So that was showing some of the Saab, data Saab, and their computers from that era. But a bit broader and more personal computers came with the ABC-80 made by Luxor in Sweden. It had the programming language BASIC, which was quite easy to learn programming in. It was mostly small businesses. It was quite expensive, but there were families getting it as well, and was quite common at schools in Sweden. There's quite a lot of veterans in the Swedish games industry that started using the ABC-80 either at school, at home, or went to a programming course. So people like Oskar Burman today at Fast Travel Games, Andreas Axelsson from one of the DICE founders, Magnus Nordin, working at Embark, or Carl Holnell, one of the Commodore 64 guys that made a lot of games and then pivoted into other programming. So this was really a kickstart. So you had the background with the terminals and the big mainframe computers. Then this made it come into more small businesses and homes and schools. A lot of the games were not sold. Was rather that you got what they called like a list with code, and you had to type in the code yourself and then press run. There were simple games like submarine chase, moon landing. One of the most popular was Glip, Pac-Man clone. Looking at more commercially and video games, this is a quite unknown but quite important company, Intron. It's a Swedish company in the early 80s. They did software like bookkeeping and similar. But they got a contract with Philips, and they were actually 5-time full-time employees and other people around them working with games, developing games for the Konsol Videopac. They were quite big actually. They had a huge profit in 1983. But as all video game consoles, there was a big global crash, mainly in the US, which was the major market, that put the pressure on Coleco, Mattel, and Atari. Intron continued with software, but they also tried to do games for like the home computer MSX, but they eventually folded the game production. But this is an important landmark. It's the first commercially successful Swedish game developer. I'm going to take a look at one of their games. So that's like an exciting helicopter game, quite advanced actually for the Videopac. Then VIC-20 came out in 1980. It arrived in Sweden in 1981. This is when the home computers started to be less expensive. There was a lot of different competitors like Commodore PET, TRS-80, Apple II. But the VIC-20 became quite successful in Sweden. It was called Folkdatorn, like the every man's, every people's computer, or how to translate it. It costed 2,000 crowns, which is equivalent to 5,300 crowns. And you started to see more games being sold in stores. So you could buy games for around 200 to 300 crowns. This is equivalent of like 500 to 700 crowns in today's currency, adjusted for inflation, which is actually kind of what games still cost today. They cost around 500 to 700 crowns if you buy a new game on console. Here we started to see a bit of games from Handic. You see the small logo below the VIC-20. They were the distributor. They did also publish games. So you had, for example, text adventures like the Four Sarcophagus, Mutant Spiders, and The Ship, coded by Syntax Software. These came out in the VIC-20 and later to the. They were actually exported to other countries. So Syntax Software got old school snail mail from players in the US who got stuck and wanted to know how to proceed in these games. And there were a couple of other games as well that being sold this time. What's interesting is that Marcus Nordin, one half of Syntax Software, actually still works or came back to the games industry. He's at Embark right now. But the major success is the Commodore 64. This sold quite a lot of units in Sweden. And the games started to become a bit more advanced. You see in the background Space Action by Arne Fernlund, another game that also went on export to Italy and other markets like Germany and so on. Sold more than 10,000 copies. And just as a comparison, by this time in 1984, in Sweden, there were 184,000 people over 16 years old that had a computer in their home. So now we're starting to see a bit more movement. The Commodore 64 spurred quite a lot of local developers. Greve Graphics, who made these games, Soldier 1 and Blood and Guts, were quite successful, were quite controversial as well. They used like a drafting letter that almost could be misunderstood to market Soldier 1, and their game Blood and Guts were, well, like the name said, quite bloody and had a lot of guts. So they got headlines in the evening newspaper that here is about to kill or be killed. Well, I guess the marketing worked in the sense that they got attention. There was quite a lot of other ones. So you can see here, Carl Hornell was very productive in some of these games. Fungos, Toad Force, Velocipede. You can even see him putting in the Swedish flag there in the background. There's quite a lot of other ones like Marcus Charville and Richard Dagskjöld. It's unlike Inton, we're still talking bedroom coders. They can barely make a living of it. It's mostly driven by passion and interest to learn. So what happens is a lot of these actually continue and becomes like real programmers or work at other computer jobs. Very few make a career of developing games. There's other platforms like the ZX Spectrum, Amstrad, and MSX. There's a couple of Swedish games to these as well. There's the odd title of Ninja Master, which is actually like a sports game, like summer games or winter games, but with a ninja, so you actually get medals and stuff. Bo Youngeboy, who made Fairlight, the game, the bottom left one, isometric perspective. An adventure game was very successful. It actually topped the British charts. This is probably one of the first major commercial Swedish hits outside of our borders. Let's take a look at Fairlight. That's quite some amazing adventure back in the time. So I've mentioned a lot of males. Unfortunately, while there was a lot of females working with at the defense research and doing the simulations, when we came to the home computers, it was kind of a boys' toys. But there were some women doing games, and I think the first known one that we know that did not a simulation but a game is Kajsa Söderström. She made a text adventure called Agent 999 in 1984. Unfortunately, Kajsa is no longer with us, so it's we'll never know how what she thought or felt about the games, and if she had plans to do more games or whatnot. During this time, there was a lot of cracking going on, meaning that instead of buying games, they cracked the copy protection, so you could make pirated copies. And to brag about the cracks, these groups put up short intro sequences. Eventually, these intro sequences became more talked about, and they tried to exceed each other, like making cooler animations, more advanced scrolls, and also sending messages to other groups. So from this, the demo scene was born. It's about competition and passion and trying to push these old computers to the max. It could be described as artistical demonstration. It's more like a music video that you watch. And there's a lot of game companies that started from the demo scene because these guys learned to code and learned to how you really can use the computer. So you have DICE, where people from Silence, Black Lotus, Subspace. You have Starbreeze, who had people from Triton or Cryonics. Neurostone came from the group Censor Design. And in Finland, you had Remedy that had the members for Future Crew. Bugbear in Finland, we're called Byte Reapers. And Funcom, there was the Norwegian company, had people from Blue House. So let's take a short look at what a demo looked like. So I mentioned before that there was 184,000 computers in Swedish homes in 1984. 5 years later, there's 500,000 computers. So things are happening fast now. And there's quite a lot of new developers sprouting up, still smaller teams, like 1 to 4 guys. But this is actually the start of something bigger. Because unlike the previous generation in the early 80s that continued to do other kind of work, a lot of these companies that start now, like Atari, UDS, Team 17, some of them will go under, but the people in the companies will continue with games. I mentioned Team 17. It's today is considered a British company, but back then the majority of the game creators were actually Swedish. And during this era, big things happened. So DICE, or Digital Illusions as it was called, made Pinball Dreams. A lot of publishers deemed this unsuccessful because, I mean, who want to play pinball on a computer? But 20th century believed in them, or 21st century, sorry. And they thought that it's tangible, it's easy. And it was a major success. For Digital Illusions or DICE, it was a project that was easy to do because it was very clear framework. You need ball physics, you need sound, audio, the visuals. So it was perfect for them coming from the demo scene and suddenly doing something interactive. So this is the start of something big.
Exportföretag. Hur mycket omsätter Digital Illusions?
Ja, jag har inte siffrorna i huvudet, men runt 1,5 miljon tror jag då senaste året.
Det låter som det var småländsk företagsamhet bakom det hela.
Ja, och från början så bodde vi ju hemma. Och
hemma det är i Växjö?
Ja, hemma i Växjö. Och jobbade liksom man gick i skolan och sov då, så jobbade man så mycket man hann. Så det blev inte så mycket läxor läst då, men ja, på något sätt så gick det ihop ändå.
Hur började det här med flipperspel?
Ja, vi fick en idé en gång när vi satt i en sommarstuga. Tyckte vi skulle göra något mer avancerat än vad vi höll på med.
Och avancerat blev det. Ett helt nytt sätt att spela flipper på datorn. Skärbinden rullar, följer kulan, precis som ett verkligt flipperspel. Med blinkande lampor, extra banor, miljoner i bonus och jackpot. Efter nästan 3 års dagar och nätter var första spelet klart. Ungdomarna åkte till spelmässan i London utan resultat.
Däremot året efter sen så gjorde vi samma grej. Fast vi gjorde lite förarbete innan. Skickade brev och demoversioner och sånt. Och då fick vi kontrakt med ett företag som ville sälja det då. Och därifrån har det rullat på, va?
Ja, så gick det alltså till.
DICE garnered a lot of interest. Suddenly it was big business. It's not just a hobby, it's actually something you can make a career out of yourself. You can have you can be a game producer. And so you started to see articles about the business, the work, the entertainment, and things were growing and they got their eyes on themselves. And DICE went to the stock market and eventually they got bought up by EA and developed into a huge studio. So that's the success case. But there were a lot of other companies during this era. And I started to see console games coming out of Sweden. So For example, Lawnmower Man and the Page Masters were created by guys from Atari. You had Combat Cars from Scan Games, and Elitserien, which is a localized version of the NHL series that was made by Neurostone in collaboration with the local Swedish distributor Brio that managed Sega. And that was also the kickstart of the local Electronic Arts office. Before that, there was no local presence from the major publishers. So that was also a big step on Stefan Lampinen set up that office. And something else happened in the 90s. You had the home PC. It was this subsidized PC that could be deducted versus your gross pay. And the CD-ROM came in, and Windows 95 made the games more accessible and gaming in general more accessible on a computer. So there was a lot of local publishers backed by book publishers or media companies that made games in Macromedia. It was quite successful. A lot of them sold over 100,000 copies in Sweden or the local market. So there's examples here of Fem Myros, Fler än fyra elefanter, or Häst och Pony. And some of them were actually made by DICE, like Häst och Pony, while Mullemek that you see in the bottom left were made by UDS. So some of these developers that were growing also took these kind of work. There was one game that stood out, and that's Backpacker, that sold more than 1 million units and attracted a lot of people. It was a game that was, it's interesting because it was very broad and not only appealing to like a traditional audience of games, but also people in all ages. So let's take a quick look at Backpacker. And from here, the industry started to steamroll. Also, the developers has global ambitions and saw the chance to do something on PlayStation and Dreamcast. The projects is starting to get bigger. You get into 3D, so the teams are starting to grow from 10 people and upwards. It's a tough time. There are some companies going bankrupt, but overall, the market is growing. Here is a couple of examples: like Kula World, Motorhead, Jeremy McGrath, Autodestruct, World Scariest Police Chases, and Headhunter. A lot of games. I think Motorhead was actually the first million seller by DICE. Also, Jeremy McGrath by Atari sold over 1 million copies. So starting to see some success. Games are getting even bigger. So the following years, Battlefield sells over 3 million copies, and DICE exceeds 100 employees. You had other games like Riddick from Starbreeze, Just Cause from Avalanche, or World in Conflict from Massive. But it is a tough period. It's not that visible on this graph, but to connect back to the one I showed you, see that there is a small dip here. And if you would zoom up, it had kind of an impact, and people was a bit concerned that is this a fad? Will this actually be something? But I mean, we knew games are big, games are here to stay. And besides that small bump, it just continued, and Sweden just continued to grow and explode. And I think what opened up more is also digital, because games used to be sold only boxes, which meant you had to have a certain type of game. It had to be able to go through a publisher, distributor, and a retailer. But when you had a smartphone or Steam on PC, or later digital on console, you can download directly. You can set different prices, and eventually free to play came in. And just as a perspective, 2013 there were 6.6 million people with access to a computer in the home. So now the majority of the population has a computer. The big ones, Minecraft with over 100 million sold, Battlefield series, which had over 65 million players, a number from 2016, so it's even bigger today. And Candy Crush. Games, Candy Crush along other games of King have been played by over 500 million of people around the globe. So these are the big successes, but there's a lot of other games. There's a whiff of Swedish games. I think this illustrates, you have games like SteamWorld Dig, there's Hotline Miami, A Way Out, Unravel, Goat Simulator, Little Big Workshop. There's a lot of games appealing to different audiences. I think this shows the diversity and the knowledge we have here in Sweden. We're quite good at finding and becoming really good at this. This challenge is rather now the amount of games out there that you have to compete with. And the earlier headlines from DICE showed a lot about economy and being a work, and now we started to get a bit more creative celebrated as well. I guess this is the closest you could get to the Hollywood Walk of Fame, is the Arrival Hall at Arlanda, and now there's pictures of the King founders and also Notch from Mojang. I guess this is the Swedish Walk of Fame. Another example or proof point that Sweden is on the forefront is the fact that the biggest IPs in the world are placed here. DICE worked on Star Wars, and Massive is working on Avatar. That's kind of a cool confirmation. And with globally renowned, a lot of this is, of course, awards to DICE and Battlefield. But when you start to look at it, you have Handheld Game of the Year, Helldivers by Arrowhead. You have Best Indie, Little Nightmares by Tassier. There's Best Action Game, Wolfenstein by Machine Games. Best Multiplayer, Way Out by Hazelight. Artistic Achievement, Sayonara Wild Hearts by Simogu. Unravel 2, that's Family Game of the Year. And even not Swedish companies, but Kojima Productions, their main audio guy responsible for the music, Ludwig Forsell, is a Swede, so he got a lot of awards. So it's amazing talent and quality here. But why Sweden? So we have the computers quite early with the military simulation, and then the ABC-8 is for small business and schools. We had the early home computer boom. We had a demo scene. And something I want to add is also the culture of games. We should thank the Swedish agent Bergsala, who's been selling Nintendo since Game & Watch in 1981. They've been working very actively with creating a game culture with the Nintendo Club that had over 400,000 members. There's probably someone here that had that Nintendo Club magazine sent to them. It's an understatement because Nintendo wasn't very supportive or had a lot of material. They had to do it themselves here at Bergsala. We had a home PC, as we mentioned, that made the computer more accessible and attracted more people. But also another thing that's very important, we were very early on educations. One of the first educations were Powerhouse in Kramfors. You see the small media clip. It's an article I wrote back in 2001. And since then, I mean, now we have Future Games, Games Assembly, a lot of the universities have educations. So that's another important thing. But why Sweden? We're running low on time, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but there is different, once you're getting successful, others are getting inspired. And maybe our engineering and our way of thinking collectively works well when you do games. We're going to look a bit about the future. It's an exciting future. There's a lot of tools now that makes game development easier. You used to need to be a programmer to understand it. Now tools and game engines are opening up for creatives. You don't need to even do your special backend tools. There's a lot of off-the-shelf components. combined with digital distribution, this is a form of democratization. The competition and the selection is higher, but you have a chance to enter even though you're not a hard coder. The challenge here is to how do you stick out? How are you unique? The players, they are getting older. We have our largest spectrum of players. Those who started in the 80s, I mean, that's 30, 40 years ago, and they still play today. How will this change gaming? I mean, look at Pinball Dreams, very tangible concept. Backpacker, you travel around the world. Quiz game, you have games like Star Stable, but also Goat Simulator. It might be a freaky game, but it's tangible and something you understand. So how can you use the recognition and appeal to different audiences? There's new markets. The gaming industry is growing. We've seen Southeast Asia growing, but also like India is making a dent. Here's a game from India. And looking at the population, we know that India and China eventually will take a downturn, and instead Africa's population is going to grow, and they are starting to catch up technically and financially. So it's a bigger global market that's with a lot of opportunities. You have the new consoles, of course. Technical achievements creates buzz, creates interest. And they are more integrated with the systems and the digital download. So Nintendo started with eShop and connected with the news, and Sony and Microsoft are taking further steps. And crossplay, well, that's another thing that's the expectation is starting to be that you can play with your friends no matter what platforms. You have Fortnite, but you also have smaller games like Deep Rock Galactic. There's Rocket League, Star Wars Squadron. So the expectations are to be more open to your community, update often, and your ambassadors are your faithful fans. And this leads us in as games as a service. Games like Payday and Battlefield, but also Candy Crush, continues to evolve with new content, and that's attracting new players, also retaining players. And the big hurdle is not the price, it's more the time. How do we have time to play all these games? There's so much to select between. And that ties into subscriptions and streaming. You're seeing Game Pass, PlayStation Now, EA Play, Apple Arcade, Luna, and Stadia. Some of these services have subscriptions similar to Spotify and Netflix, meaning you have more to watch and more to consume. And streaming means lower barrier to entry. If you can stream right on your mobile phone or smart TV, you don't need to download, you don't need to buy an expensive console. So this in combination could elevate games even further. And then we have VR. Another exciting one. I'm carefully optimistic. It's a niche, but it's slowly growing and becoming a steady niche. I still believe PC, console, and mobile is going to be dominating, but I think this also is going to be an attractive platform if it can continue. Yes, that's it. I accelerated quite fast there on the end because we're running out of time. I'm not sure we have time for questions, actually.
Great. Thank you, Martin. Oh my God, it was so good, so nice to listen to everything. And we also actually got some questions about the future, which was really nice that you went into and dig a little bit deeper. In the last slide, I think we can maybe post that later on also in some other sense. There is your contact information, and I think that we can ask the people who have written questions to either send them to you or send them to us, and we can forward them to you. That's okay?
Yes, sounds good. Great.
Thank you so much, Martin, for sharing your experience, but also like this whole journey that you have written. I think it's really nice, and I'm hoping for everyone to like internalize this and see that the Swedish market is really exploding and have like started a couple of decennias ago actually, and just like going skyrocket up. So thank you so much for coming here today. Thank you everyone who have been watching, everyone who are interested in more lunch talks like this. As I said in the beginning, we have the new launch talks coming up in January, February. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, join our social media channels or Discord for news. So thank you. Hope you have a great day.